So Dinuka is a up-and-coming Australian crime novelist with her second book out, Taken. Here. I just discovered Dinuka through my husband.
Because, he's been, Paul's been so supportive with the bookshop and everything at Lithgow. So thank you. I firstly want to say that.
Thank you.
As you say, massive gap. I think basically what I was doing during that 2 years was like massively worrying about every single thing I could possibly worry about. I won the Banjo Prize, really I was, this manuscript, which became the Torrent, it was really, I felt like it was my apprenticeship manuscript, I was really learning how to write. It was my first ever creative kind of writing project, and I just kept kind of working on it. So really for me, I had, in the back of my mind, I had really almost come to the decision that, probably wasn't going to get published. So I had kind of come to terms with that almost in my head. So really like that whole thing of winning, it really kind of, for me at least, it came out of nowhere. I mean, I was so happy to get shortlisted that I thought, okay, well that is my accomplishment. Like that's the thing that I can now put on my kind of author CV or whatever to send out and start querying, and try and get a few bites from agents and to win. So then when I won it, I felt like, I've kind of been, and then like it kind of, all the worries started going into my head because I felt like, oh God, people must be expecting this extraordinary thing, with because it comes with a win. By the time the Torrent got published in 2022, I had actually finished, the full manuscript of Taken, and HarperCollins had already acquired it as well by that point. So everyone kind of congratulates me for doing, you got books out like, in 2 years. Well, I didn't really, because they were both kind of written before, the Torrent got published. So I always feel like a bit of a fraud when I'm like, no, it wasn't done in that 12 months,
And they all follow the same character, but they are standalones.
Yes, absolutely. So I think, certainly nowadays, I think, if even when you're writing series, it's just they really have to still be standalone kind of books, because readers really have to be able to pick any book at any point in the series and be able to be kind of, and it has to be a satisfactory reading experience by itself. Like that mystery has to be sufficiently standalone, and kind of like tie up the loose ends of that mystery, but of course, the overall characters grow and change, as kind of the series goes. So you're playing with the same characters and the same universe, but the mysteries are standalone. So yes.
Well, from a marketing perspective, it means that the marketing team doesn't have to just sell the Torrent and use that marketing to sell subsequent novels. They can sell Taken separately, and then if people read it, they can go back and read the Torrent. I think that's just good marketing ideas. Like, you don't want to put all your kind of marketing juice in one basket because, it might not speak and resonate with everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, that's, I think I heard another actual author talk about this as well, about this idea that, when you're writing the series, like, like the people, like each time you release a book in that series, like the other books in that series get a little bit of a, a kick up in the sales as well, because people go, oh, okay, they've written some. Because it's that we all get that as readers when we find an author that we really like, or we find a book that we really kind of connect to, and then you look and you realize, oh, actually it's part of a series, or there's more books about those same characters, and you immediately, because you're already invested in the characters.
Like, did you come into writing with this immense viewpoint of thinking about your readers and thinking about how your books were going to sell, or did you come where did that come from?
Look, I don't think you can come into it with that level of knowledge, because going right back to the beginning, how I started in writing, or certainly creative writing, was for very, very personal reasons. So I am certainly not one of those writers who knew they wanted to do writing, from day dot or anything like that. I have very kind of, very kind of standard professional life, sort of degree, got straight into I'm an environmental planner by profession. And, so really writing, I'd never even considered that. And it was really when I had kids and I was trying to kind of really juggle that really overwhelming period of your life as a new parent with young kids, and then trying to manage a career that you've built up over the years. And I felt it was a very overwhelming space, and I was trying to kind of reprioritize things and really think about, okay, how can I manage this? And I really felt bits of myself kind of start to disappear, and I felt like I wanted something on the table that was purely for me, not as a mother, not as a wife, not as an employee, just purely me, just starting from ground zero, essentially entering a brand new industry and trying to learn the kind of the mechanics of it, the rules, trying to build a brand new kind of network, I guess, because I had that network in my own industry. And now I had to build it in a brand new industry. So I was just basically learning. And I didn't, and you just only know what you know at the time, and you just do the best you can at the time. So I absolutely did all the things in terms of sending it out probably way too early. Absolutely. So I did all those things, but what I did do was I learned from those mistakes, and I kept getting involved in the community, doing workshops, whatever I could to learn and get better at the craft. And then each time kind of learning from that mistake to go, okay, well, here's the feedback that says, whatever it is isn't working. And I go, okay, well, that feedback is from a person in the industry, so they would know better. I mean, in the same way that I would take that same advice in the environmental planning industry if someone gave that feedback when I was, just when I was starting in the environmental planning industry, and they go, well, this is not working because it's not, telling what the regulator needs for you to do. So in that same way, I took that feedback and kind of kept trying to get it better. But as I said, in my head, I'd already convinced myself that, well, the Torrent was probably the manuscript that I spent learning all those lessons, and maybe I could, in my head I was like, maybe I could use all the lessons I'd learnt and put that into Taken, and maybe that would be the novel that got picked up. And then when they asked me, oh, do you have another novel? And I'd be like, oh, well, actually, and I could bring this out and go, maybe release it as a prequel, how they do that.
Yeah.
It was just all brand new to me. But you persist, and if you're lucky, because there's always luck involved, because there's always luck and timing involved, and if you're able to kind of get advice and kind of keep persisting and putting that into practice, every word you're writing is building on your knowledge and kind of, building that foundation to sort of, and hopefully at a certain point the product will kind of sail away and meet the person it's meant to meet, and that person will champion it through to publication. So I remember when I was trying to get published, all I did was kind of listen to podcasts with writing podcasts, to keep learning. So so please make sure you like, subscribe and review.
Thank you. Was the Banjo Prize the first contest you entered then?
Oh, God, no. No. I think pretty much every unpublished manuscript award there was in Australia, and probably, that would accept kind of novel, like a novel length manuscript, competitions, I would have probably entered. So I entered the KYD Unpublished Manuscript Award. There was the Bath Unpublished Manuscript Award or competition. There's the UK Crime Dagger. What do they call it? I think the first 10,000 words maybe. So anything that kind of gave you like an opportunity for a mentorship or something like that, or any kind of feedback or any kind of unpublished manuscript award that either requested a full manuscript or part or the first few chapters or whatever I would submit to. And that's essentially how, that progressed. So the first mentorship opportunity I won was something called what was it called? The Perfect Crime Competition with a firm press, and they ran it with another digital publisher called Tableau, which was like the Australian version of Wattpad. And again, so I was, because I was kind of looking at all sorts of versions of how, this book could be out there. And that's how I won kind of my first opportunity. And that was really, I feel like that's the opportunity that really taught me how to write, because it was editors from that publisher who, was basically reviewing my manuscript and going, telling me, like giving me proper editorial kind of feedback, like just as they would do to a, if a person on their list, type thing. So, and I really learnt how to hone that manuscript through that experience. So, and I went through 2 rounds of edits with them, and they ended up passing on the manuscript, and and that's why I had convinced myself that this is not going to get published, because I felt, well, it just wasn't there. But that's the thing. It's also a matter of, it needs to meet the right person to champion it. Like you're working on it, but reading ultimately such a subjective thing. Like people connect with certain novels and they don't connect with other novels, and you need your book to be championed by the person who's really going to champion it, not just, it's so that's the thing. So in the end, it was exactly what that manuscript needed, was for it to meet this publisher, who really, really, wanted to champion it. So, that's how it was meant to go in the end. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, do you have any advice about finding or submitting to awards or contests? Do you have any kind of like if you could go back and tell yourself before you applied to any of these contests, what would you tell yourself?
Well, I mean, I think, it needs to be in as best kind of quality as you can possibly make it, but again, like I say that with a qualification, because it's always the best as you can make it at that stage of your knowledge, so like, I mean, at each time, even though I was submitting, now I can see in hindsight that it was probably too early to submit, but at the time, based on the knowledge I knew at the time, I was like, okay, and then I got to know a bit more about the industry. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe it was a bit too early to send it out. But look, in my opinion, I think unpublished manuscript awards are great, because in comparison to slush piles. So the slush piles, I'm sure your listeners would know, but they are the, where you have open submissions, publishers of open submissions. But honestly, so many people are submitting to those things, and it's just this huge stack of things that they'll maybe get to, I don't know how many times a year, but, it's just basically sitting there, right? But when a company or an organization is running a competition, they literally make time in their workday to, they are required to read it, and they will read it. And so even if you don't get a reply back, that is actually telling you something. It's telling you that it didn't cut it. But it's telling you that after someone has read it. Whereas the slush pie, you're never sure. Have they read it? Have they not? I don't know. It could be there for years, So the thing is, unpublished, like those competitions, within a set period of time, one, you're given a deadline to actually try and meet to it, and those deadlines I've always found useful to go, okay, well, I know that competition is opening in August or May or whenever, so I will write to that. So I know I've got a deadline, I can get something finished, or I can get my editing finished, I have a deadline. The second thing is, I know that within, the 5 months or whatever they say that the shortlist will be published, I will know at that point whether it will actually have been read, and I know that is giving me an idea of, is it kind of there or is it not? So even the absence of a reply isn't a reply, because it actually has been read. Like, I can be guaranteed that it has been read, or at least the first few chapters have been read, and it didn't cut the mark. So that is giving me an answer, whereas a slush pile is essentially not giving me an answer. So I really think, and then if you actually get into a short list or you get into a long list, like that is, you're like, oh, actually I am getting a bit closer, and so it's giving you, it doesn't mean you're not necessarily after the win, but sometimes, like I've heard with the banjo, people have, like Michelle Upton's book, The Terms of Inheritance, I think she got, was she shortlisted, but she still got published because they loved it so much, so she wasn't the winner that year.
Michelle Upton, who was shortlisted in last year's 2021's Banjo Prize. Her novel, The Terms of Inheritance, is about a mother who insists that all her daughters fulfill certain tasks before they can inherit her vast estate. So here's the pitch, which I think is just brilliant. 4 daughters, a vast fortune, and a mother who thinks she knows best. Where there's a will, there's a way. Bam, bam, you got it. Absolutely, I'm in. And if I wasn't in, I would have FOMO. There'd be fear of missing out with this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're so right, because that the Banjo website now does have so many resources. Like they do those videos, and they do give you, there's a number of kind of blog posts as well about, what kind of they're looking for, and sort of some advice from kind of past winners. And yeah, like, so it really does have a lot of, information there. And you're completely right in terms of, it depends on the competition, because like the Banjo is focusing on commercial fiction, right? So they really want to be able to know that your pitch, your market, what you're trying, where your book would sit amongst on the bookshelf. So so their submission criteria is very much geared towards that. Now, other competitions aren't as geared towards that. So it just depends on the submission guidelines. But again, these competitions are giving you free practice to do that, So use it as practice. Like it's not all of these things it's not, obviously it's the end game, we all want to get published, but while we're getting there, the point of it is to get better at it, so that when you eventually get to that point, like use all of that as free practice to do the thing, to get that practice submitting. And that's why I think, like, people have, I've heard writers talk about this, what is it called? Like they have quotas for rejection quotas, because it means they're submitting, right?
So I know, because of your book talk, so that you, around the time you were longlisted for the Banjo Prize, you got a couple of emails or phone calls that were really significant. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And so I feel like that's like a two-pronged strategy, like the contests and then submitting to the agents. So you want to talk about that? Because that, I think, is very exciting.
So, it was incredible. So, I mean, absolutely. So what I had got to the point where I felt like, even though, like, obviously, even though your head's saying, I think this book is not going to get published, like your heart's saying, I need to give it the respect, like I need to send it out there and at least give it a chance, right? So I had the submission spreadsheet, and I basically had on it, Excel spreadsheet, I had like the agents that were open to submission that were accepting kind of commercial fiction, publishers that were open to slush piles, and any competitions. So and I had the dates, and I was basically submitting. And so what I would do is, I don't think it's a good plan to just submit to every single one and slather them in first go, because that means that if you do get any feedback, you can't then update your manuscript and then resend, right? So like, you kind of do it, you kind of strategize and you do it in bits. At the same time, I think if you do it only one at a time, you'll be there for 10 years, type thing. So it needs to be a combination, but, so you need to take it in little parts. But so I was looking at opportunities for pitching to agents, and one of the great opportunities was, the agent I ended up going with, Alex Adset, she is submission only by request, so she doesn't have an open submission policy on her website. So you essentially have to kind of get to know her or somehow pitch to her in like a pitching opportunity, like the ASA do the the speed dating, and so in some kind of pitching opportunity. So I saw an opportunity. She runs a course, I think at the time it was through ACT Writer Centre, which was like a what do publishers do kind of course. Excuse me. And then, and part of that course was you get to do a practice pitch to her, and kind of get feedback. And I went, dun, 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 that's a good way of letting her know what my book is without actually pitching to her.
That's clever.
Type thing. So she kind of got to know the whole group over like 6 weeks, over kind of like 6 online,
Wow.
and in the end, she basically, she ended up liking us as a group, all of us. By that time we had all done our pitches and she'd given us feedback. And she basically at the end of the course went, you know what, I love you guys all, like you're all invited to submit to me. So that's how I got the kind of the opening to pitch to her, or to submit a full manuscript to her, and that's when I submitted to her, and then I separately submitted to another agent and a couple of other submitters, a couple of other publishers through the ASA speed dating. So I entered that as well because that was my plan, because ASA speed dating I think was in August at the time, in August. And the Alex's workshop was in July. So my plan was, okay, I will get feedback on how to pitch, because I will literally be pitching in August. So this is like a practice run. So she's actually teaching us how to pitch. That was part of the course. She will give me, she will give me feedback on my practice pitch. Plus she will hear my pitch, so it was like a double prong, but I was actually getting lessons out of it, which then I could take to the actual pitching sessions in ASA pitching. So that's what it was. And then in September, I got the news that I got shortlisted for Banjo. And by that point, Alex had my manuscript, and the other agent who I'd pitched to at ASA speed dating had also requested my manuscript. And so they both had my manuscript. Hadn't read it yet, of course, because they're too because I'm one of many who they've requested, full manuscripts from. So, and so when the announcement came for the shortlist for the Banjo, suddenly I had both these agents going, hey, you know what? We've now read your manuscript, we really like it, and they both kind of, wanted to
Fantastic.
kind of represent me, which is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that is amazing. That is amazing. Do you think that the fact that you had applied for the Banjo, the fact that you'd been longlisted and then shortlisted, influenced them to like maybe raise your manuscript to the top of the slush pile?
Yeah, definitely, because I think they would have got there eventually, because it was just one of the ones that asked for, and so they would have read it anyway. But the fact that that had then raised it in their profile, I guess, and that was just, but it was, those kind of things you can't guarantee. That was just one of those things that happened, right? So that was something I wasn't expecting. It was just like, and of course it goes on Twitter and it goes on all the social media, and they hear about it because they're like, oh, hang on, and they kind of, and because the emails that came to me were like, congratulations, it's, that's so great, and we've had a look at your manuscript and da da da. So yeah.
Yeah, no,
so I'm sure that influenced their decision.
Yeah, of course. But if you hadn't done the work, the agents would have been waiting in the wings. The contest wouldn't have happened. You know what I mean? Like.
No, totally, and that's the thing, because the thing was like for them, that wasn't just a name on a you know, like on an email or whatever, they had met me, as in face to face. Well, at the time it was all COVID, so face to face was all digital. But you know, they had like chatted to me, had some context about that. It wasn't just like, you know, when they heard about the Banjo win, that could have just been a piece, just a name on a you know, publicity, you know, email, you know, that was in a tweet. Like they wouldn't have known what that was, but they had something. They had like context to kind of go, oh, hang on, I know that manuscript. You know what I mean? And I actually have that manuscript in my email, and I can read it right now. You know, so there was some, yeah. So as you say, like. When they heard about it.
I feel like this is a great segue into Rachel's question. So we're starting a tradition where the previous guest asks a question of the guest. They don't know who it's going to be. So
as a writer, that your protagonist be likable.
I feel like this is a perfect question for you because crime protagonists are not always likable. I think Kate is quite likable, but a lot of them aren't. And was that something when you created Kate that you like kind of divvied away, or is it just, you know, a woman thing?
Yeah, look, I think more. I didn't consciously think of likability or unlikability when I was writing Kate, but what I will say is that you know, I was more going for believability. You know, I think with characters, you don't always have to agree with what they do. And there are a lot of things, like particularly in Taken, that Kate, you know, does that you're like, what? You know, you don't have to agree with what she does, but you can see how she got there, or you can see what, you know, how that character got there. And that is, I mean, I think that's the ultimate point of a novel. You know, like you know, like a lot of authors talk about this idea of, you know, fiction really generating empathy, and it's true, because like for me, I think, you know, for us to understand how they've got there, you know, and try and see the world through their point of view, or how they may have come to that decision. Because often, like even when we choose, like obviously you can, you know, other forms explore the human condition, like nonfiction or whatever, but often we as readers choose nonfiction based on our existing biases or existing political views or whatever. Whereas in fiction, we can meet all sorts of characters that we would not normally in our real life meet, or directly have contact with, or have any reason to interact with, and therefore never come face to face with that kind of experience, and therefore never have to understand the challenges that experience, you know, that person has to go through. So fiction allows that empathy, you know, like it like gets under your skin, in a, you know, it's stealthy. You know, you reach that empathy in a stealthy way, and that's what fiction can do. So it's not about, because if you're just creating evil characters, it's just cardboard cutout, you know, like bad guys. Like no one's interested in that. They're just there as a foil for the good guy, and that honestly doesn't interest me. I'm interested in believable characters, because I truly believe that, you know, anyone can do horrible things given the right pressure point. It's circumstance and privilege and the accident of birth of where we have been born, you know, compared to other people. So, you know, so I'm interested in kind of the grey in people, and if you, as a writer, to find that humanity in a person, and not necessarily go, well, here is the bad guy, let's just spit on him for the rest of the novel. Like it's not interesting to me, you know. So I, as a reader and as a writer, have no problem at all with unlikable characters, as long as there is a humanity in them that explains how they have got to that place, you know, in the novel. So yeah.
I love that. I love the idea that empathy is sort of, you let your guard down when you read in a very different way than any other time. So where can we find you?
Yes, so I have a website, DinukaMcKenzie.com, and that usually you can kind of find all my upcoming events.
And thank you for joining me. Thank you so much.
No, Thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing. It's such a expanded, chat. It was lovely. It was so good. We went everywhere.
We did go everywhere. It might have to be 2 episodes, but we'll see. Do you want to tell us your question for the next visitor on the podcast?
Yes, absolutely. So I was the question. I've actually often got asked this, but